If you appear as a guest on podcasts in order to grow your business, you are missing out. Most people think that when they appear as a guest on podcasts, all they need to do is tell their story or drop some knowledge on the audience or talk about their experience in order to get clients. But what if I told you that those were the exact things that are actively preventing you from turning podcast viewers and listeners into clients? And in this video, I'm going to cover what I call the 3-layer messaging framework to use on podcasts in order to turn someone from a casual viewer or listener into someone that has genuine interest in working with you. If you're new to the channel, I'm Devin Rodriguez, founder of podcastguest.io. We work with hundreds of business owners and we help them do one thing, not just get booked on the top podcasts in their specific niche, but more importantly, teach them all of the best practices they need to know in order to turn viewers and listeners into clients. Now, before we even get into the 3-layer messaging framework that you need to use, you first need to have the right mindset behind you appearing as a guest on podcasts. Because what most people think is podcasts are really good for branding and PR and awareness. And what ends up happening is these business owners spend literally tens of hours, hundreds of hours, and some of the clients we've worked with have spent thousands of hours appearing as guests on podcasts for branding. See, here's the reality. You as a business owner, your most precious resource, hell, anybody's most precious resource is their time. So wouldn't it be smart to figure out a way where you can optimize you being a guest on podcasts, not just for PR or awareness, but as actual client acquisition system? So with that being said, if you nodded your head and you were like,
yeah, Devin, that makes tons of sense.
You cannot just go on podcast and share your story and tell your message and talk about what makes you different. Because here's the thing, while you're on podcast doing those things, trying to get people to understand you, the thing that people really crave and desire, and ultimately the thing that gets them to take action, is when they feel the most understood. So instead of viewing podcast as a way for you to get people to understand you, start to view podcast as a vehicle that you use to get people to understand that you understand them. Because when you flip the dynamic, then you become their leader. See, everybody right now is dealing with something deep down inside that they would never dare tell anyone else. You know exactly what I'm talking about. After they've had that long day and it's 10 o'clock at night and they're just laying in bed trying to sleep, closing their eyes, but no matter what they do, they cannot fall asleep because they have a conversation going on in between their ears, aka their mind, that is preventing them from sleeping. It's like when they wake up in the morning and despite getting 8-9 hours, they're exhausted because although they slept, they did not rest. Why? Because they had something going on, that inner conversation, that battle that's going on in their mind. They're saying things to themselves like, how much longer can I live like this? How much longer can I stay stuck in a job that I hate? It feels like I have the golden handcuffs. They're saying things to themselves like, I can't believe that I made another promise to myself that I was going to overcome my addiction, but yet I gave in again. I feel like a disappointment. I'm disgusted with myself. And even as you are watching this, you've probably been in those exact positions where people ask you how you're doing and you're like,
oh, I'm doing great.
But deep down inside, you know you're far from great. You know that there's something going on, that you're fighting a battle that nobody else knows about. And here's the thing. Reason why I bring this up in the first place is because people that listen to podcasts have that same issue. Now, here's why I bring that up. Most people that have those negative inner conversations where they tell themselves all of these different things, and you could insert that for whatever it is, but more importantly, think about what that is for your ideal client. What are those things that your ideal client are saying to themselves that they would never say out loud? Why? Why wouldn't they say it out loud? Because they might be judged. They're worried about what other people think. They don't want to seem incompetent. They don't want to seem inferior to those around them. So instead, they keep it inside. They don't tell their wife. They don't tell their kids. They don't tell their friends. How you doing? Great. But deep down inside, they feel small. So now when you go on a podcast, the reason why I bring this up is because this is the perfect opportunity to get somebody that is your ideal client to realize that you understand them. And the way that we do that is when we're on a podcast, we have to verbalize what they internalize. In other words, you must say out loud the things that they are saying to themselves, the things that they would never dare say out loud. When you go on a podcast and you articulate through this 3-layer messaging framework I'm going to describe, when you articulate the things that they're saying to themselves in a way that is more visceral, than they even say it to themselves, they come to view you as the only person that truly understands what they're going through. And when someone feels like you understand them, they trust you. And when they trust you, they buy from you. So in this game of sales and marketing and all of this different stuff that we see online, the person who wins is the person that makes the customer or the client feel the most understood. So when you're on a podcast, your number one priority needs to be to get that person that is listening or watching to understand that you understand them. Now, the way we do this is by leveraging what we call the 3-layer messaging framework. And it's comprised, as you could have guessed, of 3 parts. Now, how I want you to view these 3 different parts of the messaging system that we're going to walk through is kind of like peeling back layers of an onion. We're on the first part, we're dealing with something that's rather surface level, but each part goes a layer deeper. And when you go a layer deeper, I want you to look at it like a layer of understanding that is unlocked, a layer of leadership that that person bestows upon you, that they allow you to lead them. And when somebody allows you to lead them, it turns you and your sales team into a cashier because they feel like you get them on a level that they've never been understood before. So with that being said, before we just jump right into the actual framework, the last mindset shift I want you to have actually comes from the good old Napoleon Hill. And one of my favorite books from Napoleon Hill is not Think and Grow Rich, although that's a great book too. He has a book called How to Sell Your Way Through Life. And in one of the first pages of that book, he says something along the lines of this: the greatest salespeople paint onto the imagination as Picasso paints onto a canvas. And for Picasso, he uses a paintbrush to create anything on that canvas that he desires. And for the salesperson, he uses his words and language to paint onto the imagination of that prospect anything he desires. So that's how I want you to look at this. You are an imagination activator. You need to get somebody to go somewhere in themselves that they don't typically go by themselves. So this first part of the 3-layer messaging framework is what we call the lived experience. And what this does is this describes their experience so viscerally that they say, yep, that's me. And this is when they start to say, wow, this person really gets me. So when you're able to articulate their lived experience in a way where they clearly understand that you understand them, it shifts everything. Because instead of just being somebody on a podcast, they come to view you as them, where you were once in their shoes. You get what they're going through. You're not somebody that's an authoritative figure where you're communicating to them. They view it as you communicating with them. Now, the thing that people mess up on when describing somebody's lived experience is they stay very surface level and they tell people things. What do I mean by this? They say, well, a lot of people I work with, they're really struggling to stay consistent. Or a lot of people I work with, they're sick and tired of market fluctuations and they're really just struggling in the marketplace. What they do is they tell. But what you need to get really good at is instead of telling people, you need to describe things to people. So let me give you a great example. So when you're on a podcast, instead of saying, a lot of you are super tired at the end of your day.
It's like, yeah, I'm tired at the end of my day.
But when you put it this way and you say, it's 7 p.m. and you're driving up to your driveway, you park the car, and you just sit there and you take one of those big old breaths. Because after another long day, you just sit there and finally you're going to have time to decompress from all of the stress that you just endured. You shut the car off, you walk in the house, slam the door, lock it up, kick your shoes off. You just grab the Doritos and you just collapse on the couch. And you just shut your eyes and sit there because you realize how exhausting your day just was. Do you see how different that is? See, here's the thing. Not everybody is going to resonate with the Doritos and the car. But here's the thing. When you describe it like that, in people's mind, they come to enter their own version of that reality. So for somebody else, instead of coming home and sitting in the driveway and Doritos, it might be the fact that they go out and go to the bar or whatever the case may be, whatever their version of decompression is. Let me give you another example. You might go on podcasts and one person would say something like,
and yeah, a lot of people have tried things that just don't work.
Or you can go and you could say something like, a lot of the people I work with are in the position where they have this burning desire to lose weight and they've tried everything. The 1,200 calorie a day diets, They've gone out and lived at the gym practically where they're spending 2+ hours doing cardio alone, not including their weight training. And when they look at their food, they're in utter disgust. And what ends up happening is they fall right back into the same habits that got them there in the first place because they were doing something that was not sustainable. And ultimately it left them in the position. See what I'm doing there? So it brings it from I'm telling somebody, hey, you did a lot of things and it didn't work, to a place where you're saying something that is so descriptive, using the 5 senses. We want to make sure that we're speaking to how people perceive reality, what people see, what they smell, what they hear, what they touch, etc. So as an example, let's say that you help therapists grow their practice or something like that. You could say how being a therapist is so difficult and after a long day, you're super tired, or on the other end of the equation, you could say something like, yeah, I could only imagine it's your 8th or 9th person that you're seeing that day. And secretly in your mind, you wish that that person didn't show up because you're just sick and tired of running a practice that you don't even want to be in the first place. So in between patients, the only thing you care about is this person going to cancel? And although that's going to take out of your paycheck, it's much easier to deal with that than the fact that you have to do another session that you don't really want to do. So you see what I'm saying? Like you almost feel the couch and the Doritos. You can viscerally see that therapist in that place looking at the clock to hope that that person cancels by XYZ time. You can see the person in the driveway taking that deep breath. You can see the person at the end of their day looking in the mirror, not getting the results that they're wanting and being disappointed in themselves. Why? Because you're not just telling people about their lived experience, you're describing it to them. And when you describe it to them, they come to enter their own version, their own reality of that experience. So now you're saying out loud the things that they're thinking and experiencing inside, but would never dare share with anybody else. So now we've just pulled back the first layer of understanding, where now somebody says to themselves, wow, this person really understands what it's like to be me. This person, despite everybody else around me, me having to put on this facade, finally somebody that just meets me where I am. And that's the thing. You, as a podcast guest, you have to meet people where they are. Because when you do, they come to view you as the specific solution to their specific problem. Now, the second piece of this framework is going to be what I call the inner feeling. Meaning, when somebody has a specific experience, that experience causes a specific feeling. So with that being said, this is the second layer because now it's speaking to not only the experience that that person has, but now we're layering on top of that the feelings that experience produces. So let me just give you an example. And before I do that, actually, it's very important here that you understand that we're going to use a specific language here. We're going to use a phrase that is going to help us transition from the experience over to the inner feeling. And that transitional phrase is going to be "and ultimately." So let me give you an example. Let's take the example of the person who had a long day. They came home, they sat in their driveway. Instead of saying,
you're sick and tired and you want to quit your job because you're exhausted,
what you would say is, you just got done with a 10-hour shift and you're driving up to your driveway, you park the car and you just take one of those deep breaths because finally, for the first time all day, you can decompress. So you go in and you just collapse on the couch, close your eyes for a second, and you just look back on your day and you say, tomorrow I got to do it again. And ultimately, it has you feeling hopeless. It has you feeling frustrated that you allowed yourself to get to that place. It has you feeling a sense of anxiety because you don't know how much longer you can do it, right? So now I'm describing the person's lived experience. They're like, wow, this person gets my day to day. They understand the things that I go through. But now this person says, this person understands the feelings that I have, where you're saying things and ultimately that has you feeling disappointed in yourself, where you gave up on yourself again. And deep down inside, you feel like a failure. You just feel like there's something wrong with you. And then you go to open up Instagram and you see everybody else that's ripped on the beach. Meanwhile, you can't change your body no matter what you do. It has you feeling like nothing's ever gonna work. So do you see how that is so much different than...
Yeah, there's a lot of people, they tried a lot of things and,
they tried keto and all of these things, but it didn't work. So now we got the person to understand that we understand their lived experience. Then we got the person to understand that we understand how they feel. But then the last part of this equation then is going to be to get the person to understand that we understand the thoughts that those feelings produce in their mind. So the third layer and the last piece of this onion that we got to pull back is what we call the silent thoughts. So we start at the top. The lived experience causes a specific set of feelings in that person. And the feelings that that person has produces silent thoughts that they think in their mind that they would never dare say out loud. So now we have to dive into this last piece, because we can say, and ultimately it has you feeling hopeless or depleted or bone tired or something like that. But if we really want to get this person to follow our lead and to be their person, we need to go one layer deeper. So let's go back to the example. The guy sits on the couch and he just feels exhausted. He feels bone tired. He feels depleted. I'm going to say something like, and you probably say something to yourself like, how am I going to do this? How much longer am I going to continue showing up to a job that I absolutely hate? Or let's take an example of somebody that continues to try to lose weight and they just keep giving up on themselves. And as you sit there in that mirror, you probably say things to yourself like, what a disappointment. You're disgusting. Every day you say you're going to do it, but you never do. You're such a failure. So do you see how deep this is going? Where now we are clearly verbalizing the things that they are internalizing. And when we do that, they come to see us as somebody that understands them on a level that, quite frankly, nobody else ever has. So let me wrap this up. Let me give you an example. Let's say that there's an entrepreneur out there. He's grinding his face away to generate leads. He can't really grow the business to the level he wants. So on one end, I could go on a podcast and say something like, yeah, there's a lot of people I work with and they work really hard, but they don't get the results. Sure, but I'm just telling the audience something in that case. I'm not describing it to them. But on the other end, I could do this. And I know that there's somebody that's probably listening to this right now that's in that position where they have the desire to grow their business. Like, they do all of the things. They're going to the events, they're doing LinkedIn outreach, they're doing cold email, they're doing the paid ads, they've hired the mentors, they've done all of the things. But at the end of the day, when they go to shut their computer, they look at that computer and they nod their head and they just think to themselves, I worked all these hours, but what did I get done? And ultimately, it has them feeling like a failure. It has them feeling like no matter how hard they work, they'll never get to where they want. They probably say things to themselves like, why is everybody else winning besides me? Why no matter what I do, it won't work? Or maybe they say something to themselves like, maybe I'm just not meant for this. And that just keeps them in this recurring loop of saying, I really want to accomplish this, but feeling like they'll never be good enough. You see the difference? Let me give you one more example. Let's say it's someone that's preparing for retirement and they want to have a financial nest egg that they can use for retirement. On one end, let's say I helped people invest in real estate as a vehicle to help them prepare for retirement. One person would say,
and yeah, you got to invest in real estate because that's going to be the thing for you. There's a lot of people right now that in 10 years are not going to have any money.
But on the other end of the equation, I could say, and there's probably somebody that's tuning into this right now that's at that place where they're 10 years from retirement. And on one end, they're excited, but on the other end, they're secretly miserable. People ask them, their friends ask them,
hey, you excited for retirement?
And they say, yeah. But simultaneously, as soon as they get done saying yeah, that voice creeps up that says, you know you're not ready. You know you're not even close. You know that you probably won't have the money. And ultimately, what ends up happening is they say things to themselves like, I'm going to be a burden on my family. How the hell am I going to maintain the lifestyle that I have right now? I'm going to have to give everything up and go back to how it used to be. And that has you feeling hopeless and depressed and honestly scared of what 10 years from now looks like. So what I do is I help those people leverage real estate to prepare for retirement so that they can retire with confidence and certainty, knowing that they won't have to give anything up in their lifestyle. And instead of being a burden to their family, they can be an asset. So you see the difference there? Notice as well, it's not like I have to go from lived experience to inner feeling to thoughts. Sometimes it's fluid. I'm bouncing around. It's like I'm bouncing a basketball. I'm going from inner thought to feeling to lived experience to feeling. It's all dynamic. But the more you practice this, the more fluid it becomes and the more natural it becomes. But I'm telling you right now, if you just apply what we talked about in this video, it's going to dramatically change the way that you convert on podcasts. So you could have the best offer, you could have the best call to action, but if you're the person that gets that audience to feel understood, you'll convert better than everybody else. I want to leave you with this. Being a guest on a podcast is about being able to transform and convert an audience, both individually and collectively. And when you leverage this 3-layer messaging framework that we just went through, you accomplish exactly that. And this is when people become your raving fans. This is when people feel like you're their person. the specific solution to their specific problem. That turns the sales team into a cashier because they know that they need what you have regardless of what it costs. So next time you're on a show, I want you to practice that. Don't just tell the audience things. Describe their lived experience, describe their inner feelings, and describe those silent thoughts and those inner conversations that they would never dare say out loud.